about that. There's one that it did not pass, and I'm happy to say that it did not pass because they wanted to narrow the window down to 1 week for filing for board members, which would have made it very difficult for people to access, for people to be able to do that. And so that one did not pass. And then there's another one, there's for the money being able to be spent, district resources to be able to be spent on ballot issues, and I guess like Prop P, and there is language already, but they were looking at making some more language changes to that to make it more restrictive. One of the things they talked about was the COVID-19. Their governor may call a special session that would be for liability for protection for schools and businesses, but we're still waiting for that to happen. And also too with virtual charter schools. Currently our virtual schools are spending millions of dollars in the state of Missouri. There is legislation that passed right before Governor Greitens left that allows for public money to be spent on virtual schools. And so they just wanted us to be aware that that is legislation, but they are, and it's very controversial, and they are looking into making some changes to that. And of course, vouchers come up every year, and we suspect they'll come up again this year. It is a way to funnel money from public schools. And if you're an advocate for public schools, you know that this is very disturbing. Some other bills that there will be presented this year is the recording of IEP meetings. It did come up last year. They say it will definitely come up again this year. And they said that good communication is the key. That the school districts need to spend time preparing the parents so they have a good understanding of what the IEP process is. Another one would be it's a very emotional subject, and that's the seclusion and restraint of students. That's legislation that will be coming up this year, and that is a hard one because restraining a student is a very difficult subject to talk about and how to handle that. Open enrollment is a huge deal, and the reason we have this issue coming up is because in Iowa State, they have the state actually funds the large portion of the public school system, and what this bill would do would open enrollment so that students could attend different school districts. And there's some questions. It's a huge deal. It would hurt districts financially, and the question is who makes this decision about which students can go where. So that one's gonna be a tough one. But those who know, in Missouri, we receive a large amount of money from the state, but our largest amount comes from local level. So so it's a little bit different than Iowa's situation. And again, they're talking about moving the school board election to November, and there's just fear because right now we're a nonpartisan board, and there's just fear that if that would happen, that it would become more partisan, and we just don't want that to happen for school districts. So the other one I did was, again, another legislative one, and it's on school safety and legal updates. And I'm not going to go through that because some of that stuff I already talked about, but it goes in more in depth into some of the bills that did pass. I attended one on MSEP 6, which was really interesting because on MSEP 6, it's going to look at board ethics, and it's just going to get more in detail about the ethics and our expectations. And it's listed right now, what it is so that local boards and administration can conduct school system business in an ethical, legal, and transparent manner. And it's listed under L2, L1, L2, and L3 is the way they're doing it. But right now, DESE hasn't mandated how these are going to be measured yet. So it's in MSEP 6, but we don't know exactly what's going to occur from that. But basically what they're going to be doing is it's ongoing professional learning for boards, self-evaluation, setting goals, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that this evening. But just different things like doing book studies and conferences and doing professional development and doing board self-evaluation tools. So it was overall, I wish I could have made two of me, because of course, there's always those workshops that you're in one, but you want to take the other one too. So I was happy to find out that I'm going to be able to actually watch some of the other ones. There was one on superintendent evaluation, everybody at the table, and I was able to sit in on that one for a little while because I had technical issues with one of the workshops I was actually in. So I sat in on that one for a little bit, and it was very interesting. I shared that information with Vicki too, and I didn't make copies of it, but if you would like to see a copy of that one, I have copies of that I could give you. But overall, it was a great workshop. I served as a delegate for MSBA. We went over all of the legislation that they're going to be lobbying for. Most of that we talked about here in one of our packets, and it was just a very good experience.
Thank you, Crystal. Mr. Grunewald, do you have a report?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a few comments. One, the COVID challenge continues to be a challenge, and from all things that I've seen and read that the district is putting in place and attempting to do, I think we're handling it about as well as we can, given the changing circumstances throughout the nation and our area in particular, with up and down levels of COVID. I'd like also to say that I have three relatives who work in the district, and they are very grateful for the support they've got from the administrative staff, the principals, all those who help them on a day-to-day basis, because it's a changing dynamic in the classroom with the hybrid plan, but they feel they've been supported and are grateful for the support that they've gotten. I'd also like to thank our support personnel, bus drivers, cooks, those people who kind of get lost in the charge of day-to-day teaching, but I come out of my subdivision every day and see rows of school buses going down the road, and so I know things are happening and getting done, and so I'm glad to see that, and I'm thankful for it.
Thank you. Mr. Stewart.
So I've got one update for the board. Currently, our annual external financial audit is occurring. We're about a week into it, maybe a little more, and this one's a little different than any audit I've been involved with in all my years, just because it's virtual. So I haven't seen the auditors yet. We upload documents to a portal, and they review them and ask questions, and, back and forth. I think one came by to pick up a box of information they needed to, but Dawn took care of that. So that should be wrapping up here soon. Everything's going very well, and we should have a report. I don't know that we'll make the November meeting, but definitely we'll have it for the December 15th meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Fitzpatrick.
I just wanted to mention that this evening after school we had 31 teachers participate in the first meeting of our K-5 math curriculum writing team. And we're going to meet 9 more times yet this year to finalize our math curriculum and propose materials for adoption for next year. And I just wanted to thank the teachers who worked all day and taught all their classes and then came to another Zoom meeting at the end of the day to participate with that. So thank you, teachers.
Thank you. Dr. Brock.
Yes, about a month ago, the board approved Kelly Services to partner with us for helping with our long-term subs during COVID. And so I wanted to update you a little bit on that. We have had Kelly Services subs in place daily as they're working to fill those positions. We have still been able to fill the majority of our positions on our own. They're really able to support us with the long-term ones, and then with quarantines that come up on a daily basis. You know, we might find out that we have 6 people across the district who have to quarantine, who we now need subs for 2 weeks straight. And we want to keep those, you know, the same sub for the kids for those full 2 weeks so that they don't have constant change. And so that's really the other area where Kelly Services has been helpful, is if we haven't been able to fill those quarantine slots on our own, they've been able to back us up on that. So just wanted to update the board and say thank you again for approving that partnership. And then I also wanted to make you aware that the district calendar committee will begin meeting later this month to start looking at the calendar for next year and the following year.
Okay, Ms. Chamberlain.
I don't really have a report. I just am looking forward to what Dr. Patel says tonight.
I hear you on that. Ms. Smith.
I'd also like to thank all the teachers. I know they're working really hard, way more hours than they're used to working, even though I know they work a lot of time at home and anyway, but we've gotten a lot of emails from a lot of really happy parents and grandparents who are helping their children navigate all this, and I want to thank the teachers and the principals and all the support staff for making it as successful as it can be. I'm really excited to see planning and implementation, surveys going out to get the kids back to school 4 days a week. I know parents are really, and children are really wanting that to happen, and I hope that can happen, that the planning starts taking place and that the students, or the K1 and 2, are back soon. I do want to thank Jamie Cavato and Gail Beck. Jamie gave a report last month on homeless, and I actually had an opportunity to witness what our district does for children. It almost chokes me up because I encountered a student who became homeless suddenly and contacted Jamie and just asked, what do you do? I really didn't, I mean, she told us about the program, but I just knew there were resources. And it was about 2 o'clock when I contacted her, and within less than 30 minutes, the student had been contacted, was being given resources. I was so impressed with how they took care of this student, and the things they were doing for the student was like having mom and dad right there. I mean, they were supporting the student through every avenue possible. I just couldn't believe it. And within 2 or 3 days, that student has been taken care of and is very, very happy. And so the emotional well-being of that child was completely taken care of by our district. And I was really impressed. I want to say thank you to Dr. Patel for the leadership she gives to them, and for Jamie and for Gail for jumping immediately to the assistance of this student.
Thanks so much. I'm going to go real quick. I just, too, want to thank everybody. I know that it's been stressful for everybody, and now we're kind of getting into the groove, hopefully, a little bit more. And I'll just say, sometimes when you've got a lot on your plate, it just feels like you have to do everything right now. I know that's how I am, and feel like one of those little wind-up toys, you know, that are going across that kids used to have at Christmas and stuff. And for me, what I have learned really from working in this district with other people, I mean, I think it was Bob that says, sometimes you just got to take a breath and slow down and remember that the to-do list will always be there. And if you're feeling that stressed, other people are too. And really, the biggest thing that can change things is just being kind to each other. And that nobody is expecting perfection. We're going to just all do the best we can and keep making progress for ourselves. And one of the things, I think there was one comment in the survey from the staff that you sent out related to how things were going with the reopening plan, and somebody wrote, "Give us grace." And I think that's kind of what we all need to do, is just kind of give each other grace. Look for the best in others, and I think that'll help us get through it a lot. I think that's what the teams at the building do, and I'm very grateful for that. So with that, let's hear the latest, Dr. Patel.
All right. Okay. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to give everyone a update on where we are related to COVID and our phasing back of our kids, which we all want to do. So the first slide you guys have seen a lot in a lot of my emails, a lot of the communication. This just shows an overview of our different options. We have in-person learning, level A. We have hybrid. We have a virtual or a Fox C-6 Academy, and depending on where we are with the COVID, that's where we've landed. I'm proud to say for our district, we haven't had, I'm not gonna knock on wood, we haven't had to go fully virtual yet. You know, we've started and we're 5 or 6 weeks in and we're in hybrid. So K through 12, we've had some form of in-person learning. So in the middle of a pandemic. So I think that's something that we can at least be proud of. The next slide just talks about, you know, how I share some data with you. This is the latest that was sent to me today from Jefferson County. If you look at the last 3 weeks, at the bottom is your week and the start date for that week. We are seeing a steady decline in the total number of COVID cases, which is great news. Hopefully all the mitigating factors we're putting together as a community is showing in that. This basically is just the 7-day rolling average is what we look at again. So if you look at towards the end of it, that is a steady decline, and that's what we want to continue to see. This is the other piece that we look at, which is the positivity rate. We had peaked a few weeks ago, and now we're seeing the decline again. We're currently at about 11, a little bit over 11% positivity rate. Remember, World Health Organization, you don't want to go above 5%. And we're sitting at about 11 right now. A couple of other things I do want to show you. This one, you know, we look at the community data, but we also, now that we've been in school for 6 weeks, we can look at our own data. Just a reminder, this is on our website. It is refreshed every 5 minutes, so it's live data. The data that you see here comes from all the building nurses. So the nurses input the information and it's all filtered into this. So there's a tab for students and there's a tab for staff on the very top. So right now, if you look at staff at the very bottom, total, we have 3 positive cases and then we have 21 in quarantine. No, can you see that? I can't see the top of it. 14, okay, there you go. 14 in quarantine. So that just gives you a running total. And then if you look at the students, right now we have 4 positive cases and 60, I can't even read, I need glasses, 61 quarantined as of right now. So this just gives us a good running data spreadsheet to tell us where we are in terms of COVID in our district. And then another website that was launched this week, actually, this is from the state level, and this has been really helpful as well. If you look at the tabs at the very top, you can look at it from a statewide, you can look at it by county, and you can look at it through school districts. So when you go down, if you filter it by county, so you can go to Jefferson County, and you'll notice it changes to a 1.02. That's the transmission rate in Jefferson County right now. And then if you go below it, you can even find your specific school district, and you have Fox C-6 school district right there, and then it gives you how many cases we have had so far since March. So the reason I'm just sharing, and it even goes by age group, so you can tell like ages 5 to 9 in the Fox C-6 school district, and that's the number of positive cases since March. So the reason I'm sharing this with you, and this anyone has access to this information, is just to show you that more and more as time progresses, people are monitoring the data more effectively. In March, we didn't know what we were looking at. We were trying to, figure out what the repercussions are. But now you can see even at the statewide level, it drills down to the school district. So we're getting more and more data rich, I would say. So that's something that we constantly look at in terms of where are we at when we want to bring our kids back. We want to bring our kids back 5 days a week, but how do we get there? Well, we have to look at all this information. The next slide is a whole nother piece that just started last week. Yeah, last week. This is in draft format. It is not, I have not even printed it out yet. But one of the things that we've noticed that's working really well in our districts, we're not, knock on wood again, we're not seeing that many positive cases. We're not seeing as many quarantines. I truly believe it's because of the mitigating factors we have put in place. It's the constant hand washing, the disinfecting, the face masks, the social distancing. But how well are we doing with it? So what they've created, the St. Louis region, and this was in one of my superintendent's meetings that we're still in draft form, it's a scoring guide for all those mitigating factors. So basically you would take this scoring guide and you would go to a building and score yourself on the rubric. For example, like mask usage. Are they wearing it some of the time? Are they wearing all of the time? And you get a point, you get certain points for it, and then you add it all up. And it's a self-assessment tool, basically. And it gives you an idea of how each building is doing with those mitigating factors. This is still draft form. We're still trying to tweak it a little bit more, but I think this will be another really useful tool for us to say, are we doing the best we can in our district to make sure our kids and staff are safe? So I wanted to share that with you. So having said all that, right, our ultimate goal is to get our kids back. But we know that sometimes we've got to change the plan, and we have had to do that in the past 3-4 months, right? All of a sudden there's something different, but we don't ever want to change the goal. So last week we sent out an email to the community and we said, okay, we want to start bringing our kids back. I sent out a form for specifically kindergarten, first grade, and second grade parents, and I said, fill this out and tell us where you're at in terms of, if we move to 4 days a week, would you continue to keep your kid in school, or would that concern you because we can't guarantee social distancing, and would you then opt to go fully virtual? That was choice 1. Choice 2 in the form was, would you just stay fully virtual? Like, it doesn't matter if we're in person 2 days, 4 days, 5 days, you're just gonna stay virtual. The results surprised me. I didn't expect this. So phasing back students, total number of students that were accounted for, you can see there, was 2835. Basically, a summary of this chart. Basically, families told us that if we decided to do 4 days of in-person learning, more would switch to the fully virtual option. Now, you look at that data, and that did surprise me because I didn't expect that, but it could be a number of things, right? It could be because when we sent the letter, as a county, we were on the red status, so maybe parents were more alert and they were worried, oh my gosh, we're thinking of bringing more kids in, we're in red, there's not gonna be social distancing, I'm gonna put my kid in virtual. That could be a factor. Also, I do think that social distancing piece is on people's minds. You know, the classrooms are gonna be more full. We can't guarantee that. We will make sure that they're wearing the masks. So I think a couple of things with that. So this was not, they didn't have to commit. This was just preliminary, hey, what are you guys thinking kind of data. So I do think when they actually have to make a decision, I'm not sure if the data will be the same, but we won't be able to tell till we actually do it. So what we're thinking, and JP, if you can go to the next slide, I'm gonna walk you through what the next steps are. So I said in the email last week, we're gonna phase in kindergarten through second grade first, and then 3rd through 5th grade, and then secondary. A couple of things I wanna make sure we're clear on, because I got a lot of emails on this. If we're in the red status as a community, we will not start the phasing in process during that week. So for example, if we were gonna phase kids in next week, that was the date, and all of a sudden Jefferson County Health Department releases this saying that we're in the red status that week, we would push that back for another week. So as long as we're in red, and let's say we were gonna start it, we would not start that. And a lot of parents were concerned about that, so I just wanna make sure that we share that information, and staff as well. We're planning on sending an email to the staff tonight, just to kind of give them some more information and details about the phasing in process. Tomorrow, we'll send out an email to all the families, and I will tell you, it is a lengthy email. It is a lengthy email for several reasons. Because I do get information like, my goodness, your emails are long. But if I don't give the details, then there's also, on the other end, there's 100 other questions about that. So I'm trying to give all the details in the email, so please read the email thoroughly. In that email, there will be a form that you'll have to log on to Tyler, and you have to commit to us. And this is only kindergarten, first grade, and second grade right now. And those families will commit whether they want to stay in hybrid and move to the 4 days, or whether they want to stay in virtual, or if they want to flip, like switch, because we're going to allow that for a small window. So that'll be tomorrow, and that'll be open for a week. Now, parents have emailed me and said, why would you spend a whole week trying to get responses? Well, when we did this in July, I got emails from, families saying, you didn't give us enough time to make that decision. So we're gonna meet in the middle. We're gonna keep it open for 7 days, and hopefully families can talk about it. And it is an important decision, and then let us know. So that's a week right there. Once we get all that data, we then have to look at all the numbers. We have to figure out what class sizes are gonna look like at each grade level, at each building. And that means we're gonna have to balance out class sizes, right? Because you wouldn't want one teacher to have 20 kids and the other one having 8. And so that takes time to schedule all that, especially at kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. So you would at least want a week for principals to do that and work on that with their teacher leaders. And then we want to make sure we have time to communicate to the parents, hey, your teacher is going to be so-and-so. And as I'm saying this, please know we're going to try not to do teacher changes. That is something we want to make sure we minimize. However, it is a reality when you're trying to balance out class sizes. So I just want everybody to be aware, and I know there was a lot of concern about that as well, but in order to make sure your kid has the best quality education in the smallest class size possible, we will have to rearrange some changes there. And then we want to make sure that teachers are ready for this, because it is different, because you may have teachers that are teaching virtual that may not have before, et cetera. So we want to make sure that they get at least some time to process all that and give them 2 e-learning days. And this is all going to be in the email tomorrow. So now we're looking at towards the end of the quarter. And then we thought of bringing them back on November 2nd. However, that week, when you look at the calendar, November 2nd, you're in school. November 3rd is the election day. Wednesday is a virtual day. Put on a kid hat, put on a teacher hat. You don't want to have kids, especially kindergarten, first grade, second day, for 1 day, and then you're not going to see them again for 2 days, and then you bring them back Thursday and you bring them on Friday. That inconsistency that week is not going to be good. So that's why we landed on the earliest being November 9th. Kindergarten, first grade, and second grade would transition back in. Now, just a caveat, if it's red in the Jefferson County, we would push that back, but hopefully it's not. So November 9th would be when they would transition in at the earliest, and then right after that would be, well, three weeks later, because we want to make sure we're monitoring those case numbers, we would bring third grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade back.
So you're talking about December 7th then, would be 3 weeks later if you.
I didn't look at, yeah.
But if you're in the red, then you would wait. If you started with the K through 12, and then 3 weeks later, the county was in the red, would you not bring 3 through 5 back, or would you wait? Would you wait then? Do you know what I'm saying?
No.
If you've got the K through 2 have come back, and then 3 weeks later, let's say, you've had Thanksgiving and the county's in the red, would you then wait to bring 3 through 5 back because they're in the red?
I think I would look at the district data, like how the K through 2 is doing internally.
Okay.
Like if we're handling it okay, then it would be fine. But I would have to just monitor that. That's a good question. So earliest would be November 9th, and then we'd bring third through fifth grade back in. Yep, and so, yeah, so the week before November 9th, we would go ahead and send out a commitment form for third grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade, so that we can already start working on that while the kids are in school, so we don't have to wait that much longer. Once we get, that's why I ask for patience. Once we get the first group in, then it can roll out pretty easily, a little easier, hopefully. It's just we want to be very thorough in making sure that the first group coming in has everything done right the way we want it to be done. And then finally, I want to make sure that we realize at the secondary level, I know we want to bring the kids back, but when you think about schedules for secondary, you're talking about 7 class periods, 7 different teachers. And so that's a lot of changing, a lot of scheduling. So you naturally do that at the semester. At the secondary, at the high school, at your semester, your teachers may change, your classes may change. So we are realistically looking at the semester for bringing back secondary kiddos. And that is 2 reasons. One, especially is when you look at the case numbers, the highest is at the high schools. That's where we're getting the most quarantines and the most positive cases, and we are concerned about that.
Dr. Patel, do we know, based on contact tracing, if we've had any cases that have been traced back, the transmission has been traced back to the school environment?
We do know that, and right now we do not have any that has been contacted through the school environment.
See, that's
it is
really
outside the
important for
community.
parents to understand that our mitigation strategies have really worked in that regard. And so if you can send the signal that, hey, we're doing things to make sure that if your kid comes to school, he's not going to get sick from being there.
Right.
That's really, really important.
Right, absolutely.
Question? I thought I saw you. No? Okay.
And so good news. The good news is we're bringing our kids back. I know it may not be ideal. I know we want them back tomorrow, but we just, again, I cannot reiterate enough how much planning this takes and how much scheduling it takes. We'll bring them back. And good news is, as a county, we are now in the orange status again. So that's a good news, and we want to continue to do that for the next few weeks. And then lastly, this slide I just put on there so that you guys just want to thank everybody. I know we've always said that. Thank you to the teachers, the staff, our students who are being patient, but also thank you to the parents. I know you guys are at home as teachers, and I know it's difficult, and you see the emotional toll it's taking on your kids when they're home and not in school. I think we all agree on that, and we just want to bring them back. So I wanted to just share some pictures, because pictures always make me happy when you see the kids up there. So that's what I've got right now. And so look for the email tomorrow for the community, and it'll be very detailed. I will say that ahead of time.
Does anybody else have any questions? I just have 2, I'm sorry. My one question is, you said you wouldn't start the kids back if we're in red, but let's say you start them back and we're in orange, it'd be the same thing no matter what. If we were in red, you just continue.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
I'm glad you clarified that.
And then on the commitment from the parents, that is one thing that changed it, allowing people to move, because originally anybody in virtual was for a semester. With this, if we start going back to the hybrid, are you just expecting a commitment for the rest of the quarter till semester, or are you going to ask for anything more length of time in terms of their commitment to which virtual or
So this is,
the
yeah,
4-day?
good question. So once they commit for this kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, when they commit to the virtual academy, they are committing to the virtual academy till it is dissolved.
Okay,
So it could be at semester, it could be at the end of the year.
okay. And then
And the reason, I want to make sure because I know parents will be like, well, we want to get back in earlier, what if we want to change our mind? Here's the reason for that, which is very important. Every time we open the window for switches, that means we're changing the schedules around. When you change schedules around, that means what? Teachers could end up changing, because you have to balance the class sizes. And that's the hard part. I think for people to know, you know, that we want to have kids coming in and out, because we realize that it's best for them if they need to do that. But we also have to be cognizant of the teacher-student relationships that have been built.
And that's one of the things everybody, you know, it's hard on the kids, you know, with all the changes. And I guess the one thing that crossed my mind too, as you're talking about the numbers, I would anticipate that we might need to hire additional staff, and if that is the case, you'd have to bring us those hires to the board, and we might have to have a special meeting to approve new hires if we need additional staff to make it work, correct?
Correct.
Just one question relative to the teaching load. Those teachers that are teaching 4 days a week, will they have a virtual caseload too?
It's going to depend. So once we get the information, if we have more kids going to virtual, some buildings we may be able to have separate teachers, like you're just teaching virtual, I'm just teaching the 4 days in person. Some buildings, for example, Seckman Elementary, we weren't able to do that. So teachers are doing both.
I know that's really, really tough on our staff.
Right,
I
and
mean,
so
it's-
that's why
it's
once we
causing
get-
them to have to work literally day and
Exactly.
night.
So that's why once we get the numbers, I want to present it to the board in terms of this is what it's going to mean for Seckman Elementary. This is what it's going to mean for Antonia Elementary. If we want to keep it separate, we have to add 5 teachers. We have to add 10. I won't be able to tell till we get the information. But once we do, Dr. Gilman's going to work with the principals, and then we will bring the board the data, and then that's when we have to decide what we want to do.
I would hope that we could do that, because I think that would be an almost impossible task to teach 4 days a week face-to-face and do virtual at the same time.
Right. And we have to remember that the data we bring, it'll be only kindergarten to 2nd grade, and then we'd bring 3rd through 5th, and the middle, and then high, so.
Any other questions?
Can I just give a woohoo? I'm so excited, and so is everybody. I'm sure there's lots of parents at home and kids that are so super excited. I know I kind of promised my kids, I'm like, I will try, I will see, you know, we'll do everything we can to get you back in next semester, and just to know that that is a reality, as long as we don't go in red, I'm so thankful. Thank you.
Dr. Patel. Next item is 3.5 middle school map data.
Test. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to be sharing data with you too, but it's not about COVID. This data that I'm going to be sharing with you is actually about the academic health of our students in middle school. So first, I am honored to be able to talk with you guys about this and go through a plan. And while I'm the one presenting this, I want to make sure that we recognize that I am not the only one that's been working on this. So Robin Green has helped with some of the data. I've met with principals. They've met with the PLCs in their buildings with teachers. So it's kind of, this is a culmination of all of that together. So it's really a joint effort as we go through this. So I actually have 6 slides of data, and I'm really not going to spend tons of time on this, but I did want to show, so I broke this up 6th, 7th, and 8th with ELA, and 6th, 7th, and 8th with math. So one of the things that I'm really wanting to point out with these slides is you will see that as a district, we pretty much follow the state with when the state goes down, we go down. When the state goes up, we go down, until we get to that year between that 2017 and that 2018 year. And you will see that we have a big drop with that. So obviously that's something that is glaring, right, when you look at it. And I love data, and when I first looked at it, I was like, wow, that's a big jump. But one of the other things that I wanted to look at was the gap between where we are as a district and where the state is. So you'll notice, if you look back at the 2012, you'll see the big gap between the 65.9 and the 50.9. As you go through the years, you'll see that gap between where we're sitting and where the state is sitting is getting less and less, right? That's what's a little concerning to me, because yes, we're dropping, and the state's dropping. But the concern is, why is the gap, why are we not keeping that gap as big as it was before? So, you know, these slides really kind of bring that out. And I do want to point out that up until the year 2018, our average gap between what we were doing and what the state was doing was 11.2% on this slide. And we've actually dropped down quite a bit to just 1.45%. So that's a concern. Why is that happening? And then if we move on to the 7th grade, again, you'll see pretty much the same thing where that red circle is. Again, we're kind of following the state, when they go up, we go down, we go down. And when I looked at the average, again, so we moved from an average of 13.4% in our gap, again, all the way down to in 2018, we moved down to 6%. So again, you can see that, yes, there's going to be changes from year to year. We know students change, we know things change with the test, but why are we not keeping that same distance between what the state's doing and what we're doing? So that's 7th grade map data on ELA. And then you will see 8th grade, pretty much the same thing across the board. Again, we were at 13.6% difference, that gap level, and we've moved down. This one's not near as bad, it's 10%, but we have moved down with that. So that is ELA data. Now I'm gonna move on to the math data. And I just wanna shout out that I did not do science, and it's not that science is not important, but I am, in this presentation, focusing on that ELA and that math. So with the 6th grade math, you will notice, again, pretty much the same kind of scenario. The red there in that year between the 2017-2018 school year. Again, average gap was 14.6%. We were 14.6% above where the state was, and we are now down to like a 3.4% gap. So you can see there is a concern there. That's 6th grade. When we move to 7th grade, I want to point out a couple things here. So with 7th grade, the gap happens a little earlier. So when I started looking into this, one of the things is that that 14-15 school year, which is where you see as a district, we were at 48.5. That is when the MAP test went online. Now, with math, that is a little bit more difficult. So you will see that's where the big decline came from originally, as we moved, you know, doing math, paper, pencil on the map and going to technology is a little different. There's different tools that students have to learn and different ways to manipulate things around. So again, you will see that that's why that lowering of those scores is happening a little earlier, but you will also see that that gap is still there. And as we get down to 2019, you will see that our gap is less and less with the state. And then if we go to 8th grade, a couple things I want to point out with 8th grade is starting in that 14-15 school year, we pulled all 8th grade advanced students who were taking Algebra 1 from the MAP, and they started taking the EOC. So the score in the 14-15 is not showing any of those Algebra 1 kiddos because obviously they're taking the EOC. So that's a little bit of that decline that you see, and that is the same year that we went online with MAP. So you've kind of got both of those things happening with the 8th grade there. So we actually went from a difference of 14.7 all the way down to only a 7%, and then you'll see in that last year down to a 1% gap. So what I'm really wanting to focus on in this is, we know there's changes with MAP, right? The MAP test went online in 14-15. One of the things that we found was when the online test, there are two different things that we've noticed, and I'm going to talk about a little bit: multiple selection and technology enhanced. So when students take the MAP test, there are different types of questions. There's multiple choice, there's performance events, and then there's multiple selection. So we've noticed, when I go through a little bit more of this data from the item analysis, where we're seeing some problems with that specifically. And then in 6th grade moved to the middle schools in the 17-18 school year. We know anytime a group moves from one base to another, we're gonna see a decline. And then also you'll see the test scores and cutoff scores changed in the spring of 2018. All of that is information we know. But let's get down to what's important. What about our scores? These scores are what we show to the community. This is what the community looks at. So we have all that information in front of us, but what do we do? How do we tackle this, and what are we gonna look at? So this next page, there's a lot of information on here, and this is like, makes me so excited. Okay, so I just took a little snapshot. So each building got this report by grade level. This is what's called an item analysis. So we used to get these years ago. When I was a teacher in the classroom, we couldn't wait to get these and see. And then they quit giving them to us. We didn't start getting item analysis until 2018 again. I don't know why MAP took that off the table. I have no idea. So this is 2018 data. And you will see here that we're looking at reading. This is 6th grade, and you will see the DOK level, what kind of question it was, multiple choice, technology enhanced, and then how many points were possible. And then they were color-coded by how many points were earned. So you'll notice on that first one that's green, you'll see 89% of the points were earned on that question. The next one you'll see is red, 38% of the points were earned. And then you'll see how many points total for that 6th grade in that building were earned from that question. This is vital to looking at what is the problem with our scores. You have to drill down to what's the problem. So this is a great piece of data that we were able to look at. We color-coded. Each middle school principal got this. They met with their PLCs. They shared this with them. And then we were able to sit down and say, this is what's happening at Antonia Middle. This is what's happening at Fox Middle. Do we see patterns across the district? And we do see patterns across the district. So let's go to the next slide. The next slide, you'll see this is math data. Again, now we're looking at an 8th grade. You'll notice, again, we've got the red. So anything that was below 50%, we marked in red. Below 60%, we marked in red. And then you've got the yellow and you've got the green. So it breaks it down by MLS standards. And that's really important because we can then look at those MLS standards. We can cross-reference that with our curriculum, and we can say, is this something that's not hit in the curriculum? Is this something we don't spend enough time on? Is this something that we need to teach differently? Is one building showing a great strength with this MLS strand, but another building is not? So we need to pull all those together and look at that. So with that, I met with the principals, we sat down, and the next slide you will see, these are the patterns. And we could have picked out tons of things, right? But we all know that the more you focus on, the less you're gonna get done. So we looked at the top MLS standards that were showing a problem across the district, all 4 middle schools. Now, some middle schools, there were other things that they can focus on, and they absolutely can do that. But as a district, these are the things we're gonna focus on. So you'll notice those first 3 MLS standards, those are for 6th and 7th grade. We were able to show patterns with that. That last one was strictly for 8th grade, which is important because that allows that whole PLC, that math PLC, to sit and look at, that 6th and 7th. These are things that we need to work on in the ELA. In 8th grade, this is the thing that we're going to focus on. Now, that's not the only thing, but that is the thing that we are going to support as a district, and we are going to make sure that we're PLCing around and we're collaborating around. So that's math, or ELA. We did the exact same thing with math. So looking at all of those color-coded sheets, each building had their own. They sat down, they came up with the top concerns, and then we got together and we said, what's consistent across all middle schools? And this is what we came up with. So you'll see there, we've got 2 that show up for 6th and 7th grade alike, and then we have 2 that showed up for 8th grade. Again, these are MLS standards that we can go back right to our curriculum and see where those align and where the problem is at. So along with that information, and this is really, really cool. So one of the tools, and sometimes there are tools out there that we just don't know how to use or even how to access them. So one of the tools we also shared with the PLCs, this is a grade level expectation. And it goes down, so you'll see up at the corner where it says 6.rp.a, that is the MLS standard. then if you scroll over, you'll see what is expected for that student, for that specific standard. So if that's a standard that we've selected, I can go, here's a teacher, and I can say, this is exactly what's going to be asked and how it's going to look on the test. So now I have a blueprint that I can, as a PLC, as a teacher, as my grade level team, I can sit and look at this and see how is this going to be addressed on the map. So now I have something to focus on.
Tammy, is this coming off of Desi's website?
It is.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It is. And there are pages and pages and
Right.
pages of this for each grade level, so this is just kind of a snapshot of what that looks like. And then if we look at the next slide, so what are the action steps? First of all, we did the data collection, we analyzed it, we color-coded it, and we looked at the question types. So we looked at, is this a multiple choice? Is this a technology enhanced? What is the MLS description? What is the percentage of points? We went through all of that. Then we met with building PLCs, and actually this started last year before we ended up not having school starting in March. And they went over this with the PLCs, and they found where the concerns were and where the percentage of points earned for the 4 MLSs. So if I'm a teacher and I'm looking at the MLS standards and I'm looking at the map and I'm wanting to make improvement, I'm going to try to find those questions we're not doing well on that are giving me 2, 3, sometimes 4 points. Again, not that the other ones are not important, but I need to be able to focus where am I going to put the collaboration with improving these scores. And then we focused on PLC sharing the performance level descriptor. So JP, if you just click on that. So this will show you, this is another MLS standard. When it shows up on the test, over on the right-hand side, you'll see it's going to show up, the highest question is always going to be, it's not going to go higher than a DOK level 3. It's going to be a selected response or a technology enhanced. One of the things we noticed is not only did we have strands of MLS descriptors that we were low on, but a lot of them showed up as being technology enhanced, meaning students had to be able to manipulate something technological wise on their computer. And honestly, we assume that kids do really well on computers, so some of these things, right, measuring on a computer or drawing a triangle at a certain degree on the computer, those can impact what those scores are looking like. So a teacher can now look at this and say, this question is either going to be a selected response or it's going to be a technology enhanced. And we need to make sure we're spending time making sure students understand how to manipulate those tools on the computer.
And Tammy, if I may say, sometimes if the technology isn't working real good and you have a glitch, then kids give up and go on.
Right, exactly. And then you can look at the text type, and then it actually gives you sample stems that you can actually embed in what you're doing with the students to kind of help with that. So this is a great tool. This was included in all the data we shared with the principals and that we shared with the teachers. So those PLC teachers, those PLC groups, don't have to go on DESI and look for this. It's there in their packet to access and to use in their classrooms. And then, of course, part of the building improvement plan with the principals is to improve those scores. And then the second page of action steps, focusing on those PLCs and sharing sample stems. So if you don't mind clicking on that for me, please. So you'll see here, this is the performance. So as a teacher, I can look on here and I can see what would my student need to do to get a proficient or an advanced score? What is expected from my student? So as I'm looking at my student work, I can make sure, are they meeting that criteria for those different scoring levels on the map? And then I also we looked at the program alignments. So we are very fortunate as a district that we have a board that has allowed us to get multiple things that support MAP. USA Test Prep, I'm going to come back to in a minute, but IXL, the buildings have, it's a great tool for math. When I reached out to the teachers and the principals, they said the teachers really see a benefit with that. No red ink is something that we already have, great for ELA. Common Lit is also something that we currently have. And these all have components that align with the map. The other cool thing is some of them also have components of the technology enhanced questions. So not only does it align with the MLS standards? And we can pick specific standards, but we can say, we would like this question as a technology-enhanced question, or we would like this question as a multiple selection. So multiple selection is, if you read a question, you might have A, B, C, or D. You don't just choose A, B, C, or D. There could be 3 answers. Well, guess what most students are doing? I'm selecting the answer I think is right, and there might be 2 other answers. So that was one of the patterns that we also noticed when we were going through the data, is a lot of the multiple selection questions our kids are missing. And honestly, I don't know that they're missing it because they don't understand the content. I think they're missing it because they're not understanding what is a multiple selection question. And then data conversations around the supports mentioned above. Doing those conversations in second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. And honestly, all of those things listed in number 6 are cost effective. They align with the map, and we can specifically target those strands that we know that we are struggling with. And then, of course, something we used to do map preparation days. We used to celebrate. Map is coming up. We'd have a theme, right? Sometimes we'd buy shirts. So I think those are things that we need to go back to. So those are action steps. Obviously, we're in a pandemic this year, right? I would like to tell you guys that we've got this plan in place. I'm going to share it with the principals, and you're going to see a 10-point jump. But we're in a pandemic year, right? However, that doesn't mean, so we're in the middle of a pandemic, this work doesn't start till next year. No, this work starts now. We currently have, in the middle school, we have 666 students on virtual right now. So just think about that. We have things to focus on. There's no doubt about that. But we have 670 students virtually, and it's very difficult to try to make sure that that piece is happening. So as Dr. Patel has been talking about bringing these kids back, second semester, if we can bring these secondary kids back and we can really start focusing on that, that is going to be huge for our kids and for our teachers. So that is really all I have. This last graduation, and many of you were there, we were able to celebrate, $8 million in scholarships at one of our schools. And we know that this is a way for our kids to get to their next step. And we need to make sure that we're doing our part to support this and to help our students grow academically, and honestly to give the teachers the tools they need to be able to focus on where is that improvement needed. So, questions?
I don't know, are you familiar with the principle of Occam's razor? In other words, if you have 2 problems out there, always look to the simplest solution first. If you look at the 6th grade data and the 7th grade data for our kids over the years up to 2018, we had a pretty unique thing happening in our school district. Our kids were going from 6th grade to 7th grade and not losing any achievement level, which was pretty extraordinary because that typically doesn't happen. Usually when you make that change, as a matter of fact, when I look at the data, I'm not so sure they weren't doing a little better when they went from 6th grade to 7th grade. And then something changed. We moved the 6th grade into the middle school, and everything crashed. And so my question is, what did we start doing differently with our 6th graders when they got to 7th grade? And what did we start doing differently with our 7th graders when our 6th graders got? And so my concern is, it's not necessarily that it's something structurally changed significantly. Mm-hmm. When we made the change from 6th grade, moved our 6th grades to the middle school, structurally there was an event that it took place that caused our kids to literally go from being a well above average 6th grade and 7th grade to a very average, except for the 7th grade that was there before, the 7th grade that actually was finished in the middle, in the regular schools. Mm-hmm. They didn't drop. But since then, they have dropped. And so, is there something else going on there? Did we stop doing something, especially in our reading program? Did we make an adjustment? Are the kids not doing as much reading and math now, once they go from 6th grade to 7th grade?
Well, one of my questions to Tammy was, I know, and I'm not sure exactly when these programs started. I don't know what the current interventions are with reading or math at the middle school, but previously we had the Reading Counts program at the middle schools, and I know kids set goals, and it was a big deal to meet your reading goal in Reading Counts. We also had the Read 180 program with Scholastics, and that was way before that got discontinued. And that was a program that was, a 90-minute block to anybody that was struggling that could get into that program, depending on the
Accelerated
number.
reader.
And I don't know what the interventions are now, and I wondered too if maybe there's a difference. Previously, there was more teaming where the same group of kids traveled to all their subject area teachers and had an advisory together, and I don't know if that's still in place.
So we do
are
still
those
have-
factors?
We still have teaming. Now, not every student is on team, and this happens especially with our advanced kiddos. So I might be an advanced student that has these 3 teachers for, if I have these 3 subjects as a regular subject, but then I have an advanced math, but we don't have a math teacher on this team that teaches the advanced math, so they may be off team for that math teacher. Or sometimes for SPED purposes, right? If we don't have enough teachers, so we always try to keep, especially at the middle school, we try to keep those SPED teams together. If I'm a teacher that's a CWC teacher and I specialize in social studies, I'm always going to try to keep those teachers together. But sometimes that means that SPED student may have to get that CWC class on the other team because that's where those 2 teachers are teamed together. Now, as far as interventions, so every student does take literacy. That is something we started, 5 years ago, 4 years ago. So every student takes literacy for a semester, which is strictly based on reading content. We also offer Wilson, which is a lower level. It levels kids with their reading, and it really helps support. Now, the problem with that is students are placed in there due to their Lexile levels and a couple other data points. But for that program to work, you really need to keep it 8 kids or less. So it's really difficult at these buildings when you're trying to service, 600, 800 kids in a building to try to pick those lower level readers and get all the kids in there. What I hear from teachers all the time is, I want more sections of Wilson. But, being able to staff more sections of Wilson when you can only, for it to work right with fidelity, you need to make sure that you're keeping that to about eight students in there.
Okay, and then could another factor be that there's more elective options, so that then it makes it harder to keep the kids on team too? There's more options as far as, we used to call them exploratory. I'm showing my age again, but where the kids get to go and try out another class.
It could.
Like
That does have a little bit to do with it. And then to Jim's point is what happened with that 6th grade. And I have no data to back this up. I'm just going to tell you from an elementary teacher where I taught for 6 years. If I was teaching a math lesson and my students were struggling, I could teach a math lesson for 90 minutes if I needed to, right? At the middle school level, when math is over at 47 minutes, math is over, and there's a difference. And I know at the middle school level, I'll have those kids again the next day, but there's a difference in when I've got my kids in the groove of math and I can keep them there, and maybe I'm focusing on that for the next, hour. When that bell rings at 47 minutes, those kids are moving on to the next. So I think that's a little bit to do with that.
And I agree with you. Having taught 6th grade, I agree with you. But here's the thing that it's hard for me to understand. When our kids went from 6th grade to 7th grade, they continue to do really well until we moved the 6th grade into the middle school, and then everybody flattened. And is it because we have too many kids in the school? Is that a structural thing? Is it the fact that instead of a school having 100 6th graders to keep track of, they now have 250 6th graders to keep track of? I have no idea, but when you're making the transition from elementary to middle school and you're not losing anything, that's a pretty extraordinary achievement. That's something that you should really work hard to preserve. We go from 17 to 18 and everything crashes. And I don't know if it's an issue of overcrowding. I know we have 800 kids in one of our middle schools. I'm sure that's a factor. But it's something that we really need, and here's why. Because generally speaking, the condition that our kids are in, achievement-wise, when they leave 8th grade and go into high school, they pretty much carry that level of achievement all the way
Yes,
through.
absolutely.
We had an extraordinary thing. We had 6th grades and 7th and 8th graders that were leaving as strong as they were when they came well above the state average, and we lost that. And we
Tammy?
really haven't looked at it until tonight.
And Mr. Shalou, it is my job to look at that and make sure that we bring that back. And
I
love
appreciate
data.
that. Good presentation,
I love
by the way.
data. I love working with the teachers. And, you know, I would love to be able to stand here and promise you, you're going to see a huge turnaround with this. I don't know if that's going to happen this year, but I can tell you that the work and the groundwork is going to be laid so that we can see a change in this.
Can I say something about this? As a educator, current educator, I think that multiple selection and technology enhanced questions are exactly, I mean, the kids are having trouble with that. But I want to remind the board that this is just one assessment, and that we can't tell our community that we should just be valued on that one test. We're so much more than just MAP, okay? And the things that we've done in our district the last 5 years have made the learning experience for every child, I believe, so much better. So I would hate for this presentation tonight to be negative, and parents to feel like we're not as good as I think that we are. I think we're an amazing district, and this is just something, it's good that we look at this and we identify where we need to improve and grow, and but there's so much more to this district than just a MAP test. But in the middle school, there are some areas where, like, have we looked at advanced classes to see how are they teaching differently compared to the regular classes? And if I look at the high school setup compared to the middle school setup, is there any way that we can have it be more lateral and
Like
just
a vertical alignment.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we actually started doing work with that last year, getting our 8th grade teachers with our 9th grade teachers to see what do those students need when they go to high school. You mentioned something about advanced classes. So some of our core classes, we do have set advanced curriculum. Some of them, we don't. So, you know, let's say you're a 7th grade English teacher and you teach 7th grade regular and you teach 7th grade advanced. It is really up to the teacher and the PLC to decide what does that advanced class look like. Is it different novels? Are you asking them to do different things? Math is a little different. Math is a little easier to signify. So, if you're an advanced math student, a 7th grader, you're going to be taking that 8th grade class, right? You're going to be moving those kids up. And honestly, we've looked at doing that a little bit with our language arts too. Really, you could do that with language arts students. A 6th grade language arts student who's advanced really could take 7th grade language arts. Where it really doesn't work is with social studies and with science, because there's a set way that has to happen. So those are absolutely things that we can look at.
I have one
So
final
much.
question. Relative to ACT data, how many kids do we have this year achieve 30 or above on the ACT? Just curious. In both high schools.
From last year,
From this past year, yeah.
well, we didn't have, our seniors did not take the ACT last year, so I'd have to go, I don't have that
Okay,
data
so
in
that
front of me.
data is not any good then.
Right, well, our seniors didn't, so the seniors actually tested today, because we weren't able
No,
to test them.
relative to the graduating seniors, how
Oh.
many,
I would have to look that up, I don't have
does
that data
anybody
in
have
front
any
of me.
idea what that is?
So,
Not off the top of my head, I do
Well,
not.
I know we had you said about $8 million in
Scholarships.
scholarships, so apparently it was pretty good. I just want to add something that's important. The class of 2020, as 7th graders, we had the highest percentage of kids that were proficient and above, maybe with 76.2, probably the highest percentage, well, we've had in the history of the school district. And so there is a connection between what those kids are doing on the Missouri Assessment Program and how much success they have. And keep in mind, those kids have to take assessments if they want to go to trade school, if they want to go into the military, if they want to go to college. Matter of fact, even if they want to apply for a job now, sometimes they make them take assessments. And so, you're right, Michelle. Not everything that can be measured is important. And there is a lot of things that are important that can't be measured for sure. But the truth is, our job is to prepare our kids to be competitive for life and be productive. And even though there's a lot of other things, unless you can come up with a way of measuring that, it's hard to make a case that's good or bad. And so it's the measurable things that we have to look at. But anyway.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for the
That was a
presentation.
very,
Thank you so much.
very good presentation. Thank you very much for your
Yes.
whole team and all the work you're doing. That's really good.
Tammy, I have just one question. Have you looked at the difference between the middle schools to see if there's a huge discrepancy? Because we do have a middle school that is very large population, and how that may be affecting them in comparison to the ones with smaller population.
So honestly, we didn't look at the size of the buildings. We actually just took the MLS descriptors to see what was consistent across all middle schools. And when we looked at that, the same thing that they were scoring low on at AMS were the same things they were scoring low on at Seckman Middle School. So AMS being the smallest middle school up to the highest middle school. So of course, size can have something to do with it. And, it's kind of like when you're looking at a science project, there's multiple different factors. And when you change one thing, it can change the whole thing. And so, I feel like this is good data. Teachers need something concrete to work on. And I think
Right.
this really gives them that tool. And I love putting it together. And I don't want teachers spending the time putting it together. So I do think that could, that absolutely could have something to do with it.
I also want to say that I'm not a fan of the map, but it is, we are credited by how we perform on the map. So it is important data that we look at the map. We're compared to other districts with the map. So this is a test that we need to look at and see where we can make improvements. And so I really appreciate what you've done looking at it.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda, 3.6, Fox Foundation presentation. Mr. Scott, Ms. Boggs?
Good evening, everybody. How are you guys doing tonight?
Just fine. How are you?
We're doing well. We're doing well. First off, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to come speak to the board about the C-6 Education Foundation. It's a part of the district that has been around for 20 some odd years that I think people know about, but they don't know about. So I'm going to talk to you just a little bit about what our goals are, what we do, how we can help support our staff, how we can help support our students, really, and just continue on with the things that we all want our kids to do, and that's to be successful. So a little bit about the C-6 Education Foundation, AKA the Fox Foundation, and our purpose. 20 years ago, 1999 is when we started, and the purpose was to develop resources and funding for projects that enhance the educational well-being of all students in the Fox District. Basically, what we're here to do is to try and support our teachers as much as we can in the classroom, support our schools as much as we can in the schools, and support our district overall as much as we can with financial support for curriculum for items that they want to do in their classrooms and in their buildings. We really focus on 4 areas, and really just 3 areas. The endowments, I've been on the board for 6 years, and I don't think we've talked about endowments once, but child assistance, classroom grants, and cultural grants, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about those here in a second. Just a little bit about the board of directors. We have 13 members, or 12 members right now, with Matt Gearhort, class of '87, as the president, Kent Dunafin, class of a long time ago, the vice president. Our treasurer is Kim Robertson, secretary is Ken Ray. Our other directors are Lavona Robinson, Mr. Shalou, Mr. Grunwald, Dr. Gilman, class of something, yeah. Tara Tessero-Boggs, Dan Glore, and myself. So that's a little bit about us and the foundation board.
You might want to add that Judy Smith had served on that for
Yes.
quite some time.
Yes,
too.
Judy's, and is not on right now, so we're looking for that elusive 13th member right now. So, yeah, so thank you, Judy. Eligibility. Here's the great thing about the Fox Foundation. Any teacher in our district is eligible for a $100 classroom grant. It can be for supplies, for things that they want in their classroom, for educational support. All they need to do is basically fill out the grant application, complete some paperwork, have their principal sign off on it, have the assistant superintendent sign off on it, and send it up to us. We meet once a month to talk about those grants and to go over the grant proposals. We discuss if they meet our guidelines, and then make a determination based on the information down there if the grant's approved. With the classroom grants, we've had classes, grade levels come together, and if there's 4 teachers in a grade level, they'll put that money together and ask for a little bit more than the $100 to support things that they've got going in their grade level. So it's a wonderful opportunity. So I can't, I wish I could encourage our teachers more to fill out that application. The application's on the website under the C-6 Foundation. You can find that at any time. Once again, it's a simple application. Fill it out. Have your principal sign it. Have they'll send it up to the assistant superintendents. They'll sign it. We'll get it to Cindy Nybert, and it comes to the board. So that's basically the discussion about submitting the applications. I would just also like to remind folks is that please do this in a timely fashion. We tend to meet once a month, but sometimes things come up and we don't always meet. So if you know you have a grant that either the school, the classroom wants to have us look at, please get it done early enough so that we can get it approved and then get that money to the building. That money goes into the revolving accounts of the building, and then it's dispersed from there. Raising funds for our students. So what we do as a foundation is to give money out, we've got to get money in. So over the 20 years, we've done things from a walk at the high school. It used to be our big fundraiser. Our retirees and employees contribute quite a bit of money to us. As a former employee here, I had money taken out of my check every month that went directly to the foundation. I know Dr. Gilman probably has those forms on his computer that if any teacher is interested in doing the payroll deduction for the foundation, I'm sure we can get you that form. It's a simple form to fill out. And that's a big part of what we do as far as raising money. Our retirees are great for, once a year, we'll make an appeal to the retirees, and they'll donate money for the foundation as well. Our major fundraiser, the last couple years has been the Foxtrot 5K 1 mile walk. And that's been supported by members of the district, by the schools, participants, community businesses, and the Arnold Tourism Commission has supported us in that. Since 2014, we've also been applying annually or biannually for Jefferson Foundation grants. And we've received quite a bit of money from the Jefferson Foundation. With that money, though, it's pretty specific on what we can use it for. So it's, as we've gone through the years, we've been able to add to that. We use that for student welfare grants, Special Olympics in our district, our special needs prom, and prevention programs in relation to drugs and alcohol programming. So that's pretty specific money, but when we have folks that submit grants for that fit into those categories, we have a considerable amount of funding for those. So once again, I would encourage you that if you've got a grant that might fit under those stipulations there, please submit it, because we can typically fund those and fund those at a good level. What we support. So what you see up on the wall right now are some of the sample grants that we've had for the past couple of years. I want to specifically talk about welfare grants here in a second, but Guffey Elementary K-5 social and emotional learning curriculum fell under a welfare grant, so we probably funded that out of that Jefferson funding for that. The other thing that comes along with welfare grants is we have needy kids in our schools. One of the things that I worry about with our kids not being in school 5 days a week is as we get into the change of seasons, one of the things the foundation has funded is welfare grants for kids to buy clothes and needed supplies, clothing, shoes, coats for kids that don't have those or have outgrown them. And that's typically a counselor, a teacher, a principal contacting someone on the board and saying, hey, we need some help. I think those go through Gail now. Am I correct on that?
Carla has those now.
Okay.
Yes.
And that's available to our teachers, counselors, principals. If you've got a student in need, those are typically cards that you can go to Walmart to buy those goods. You turn the card back in with the receipt, and those kids can get the items that they need. Under cultural grants, we've been funding a jazz clinician to come down to Seckman High School for the past couple of years. I know Ben Middleton and our students at Seckman High School really appreciate that. Under the welfare grants, we've also made contributions to Fox and Seckman's project graduation programs. On an annual basis, I want to say we probably have contributed about $1,000 to $1,500 a year to help support those after graduation activities. 8 through 12 district anti-bullying seminars, we've supported that across the district. Butterfly houses at Londell with the classroom grants, Fox Elementary. We also do help with technology in some cases. We have the ability to fund some technology requests. So in this situation, special ed headphones we funded, as well as the National Leadership Academy. The last couple of years we've been sending students from Fox and Seckman. I believe it started with one student at both schools, and then it has grown. And we've been funding some of that money for them to go to that wonderful activity. I know last year they weren't able to go, but we'd like to be able to do that again this year if they're going to have the academy. What else we support? So once again, welfare, classroom, and cultural. I've got a couple of years up here from 2017 to this past year in annual amounts that we funded. Over the last 10 years, we've funded over $200,000 to the district, as well as we average about 60 to 75 grants annually. I can't encourage our teachers and our staff enough to fill out an application and apply for a grant. The classroom grant, once again, is an easy situation. Our last meeting, we bought, someone put one in for some dividers in a kindergarten classroom, I think it was. And we bought some dividers to help out with spacing. Those types of things are available to any teacher in the district. You've got one grant per year for the $100 classroom grants. We have teachers that every year, same time of the year, will get that grant application. A lot of supplemental materials for the classrooms we're able to fund. So the Fox Foundation is out. The C-6 Educational Foundation is available to our district to help us support any way that we can, and we look forward to being able to offer more money and support to our kids, our teachers, and our schools. I don't know, Jim or Bob or anybody, if you've got any other comments on this. I'll open it up to some questions, but you guys have been a big part of the foundation as well.
Just one thing, it's important for people to know that the C-6 Educational Foundation is completely separate from the school district.
Correct.
It's an organization that is not connected to the school district in any way other than it's there to support. We're like other contributors to the school district, but we're here to support the achievement and the learning and the excellence of our students as they go through school.
One of the things when it first started in 1999 was they just asked each teacher to give $1 a paycheck. And it was just automatically taken out and went in. And that really, I mean, nobody notices $1. And it was real simple for everybody. And maybe if we could get forms out to all the buildings, the teachers would just check it off. And $1 a paycheck it's twice a month. And I mean, that really helps.
Yeah.
And it's a simple way you can contribute to that.
I would throw the challenge down. I'm sure Dr. Gilman's probably contributing more than $1 paycheck. I was when I left here, but, you know, he's probably in the $10, $20 to $40 range per paycheck, I'm sure. Any other questions for me on this, or for any of the board members here?
I just want to thank you, Mr. Scott, for taking the time out of your evening to come and give this presentation. You know, as superintendent of 11,000 plus kids, my vision would be that our kids are so competitive in the world because they can step up and they will be able to compete with any East Coast, West Coast school, get into any university, West Point, whatever, job, trade. And I would love for them to be innovative and critical thinking and you name it. So I appreciate, you know, anything that the C-6 Foundation can do to support programs like the St. Louis CAPS program or continue to send our kids to NLA. You know, I think we need to be competitive, and we can, but we need your support, so I appreciate that.
And on a side note, since I've got the microphone, I just want to say as a community member, you guys have my heartfelt thanks for what you're doing in such trying times for our kids. That goes to Dr. Patel, the Board of Education, the other central office administrators, our building administrators, our teachers, our bus drivers, our cooks, our aides, custodians, everybody out there, our nurses, you know, seeing all the work that the nurses have to do right now. As a community member, I know it's hard when you make decisions of this magnitude because there's going to be a side that's not going to be happy and there's going to be a side that's happy. So what I would just remind you, and we do such a great job of this, is you keep loving and caring for our kids because you're never going to go wrong when you're on that side. So thank you.
Thanks, Todd. And if you present again, we'll get you earlier on the agenda. So you don't have to wait so long. Okay, the next item is Board of Education goals. And this, when we had our retreat over the summer, we talked about maybe setting goals for ourselves as a board, and I don't believe that's ever been done before, and people have submitted ideas to me, and I've got those aligned and shared them with the board members. But what I wanted to talk about tonight was not the actual goals per se, but how we wanted to go about making decisions related to those. And basically, one of the board members had suggested that we might utilize MSBA to help with that. And so you have in your board packet the information from MSBA, how they can help a board set goals. And one of the processes is to go through a self-evaluation. So basically, we have three options. We can just set board goals ourselves and meet ourselves through a retreat. And that would be one way. Another way would be MSBA has this self-evaluation information, and you have sample there of what kind of questions would be asked, where you'd rate yourself. That information would then be sent into MSBA, they would score it, and they'd send the information back to us. That costs $150 just to have them do that self-evaluation, to help them with this. So we could get the self-evaluation, and then we could use that to help develop our own board goals. The third choice would be MSBA will actually come and facilitate the analysis of the self-evaluation and the development of the goals. And that would be through having a retreat or a workshop, and that typically would last about 2.5 hours. And the fee for that is, I'm sorry, my mouse keeps moving as I talk, $450 plus mileage of not to exceed $150, so about $600. So basically what I wanted us to consider tonight, and we can make a motion or we can just think about it, it's up to you, is which one those things do we want to do? Do we want to just do it ourselves? Do we want to do the self-evaluation, get that information back from MSBA, and then do our own? Or do we want to have MSBA come in and facilitate us with that process?
I would make a motion that we just have a board retreat and set our own goals and talk about them and set those.
Anybody else have any discussion?
Is there some format that we can follow for setting the goals?
Yes, they've got information that they can share with us. One of the things that I haven't sent out to you yet, but I was going to take the goals that you guys set, and I was going to probably make them a little bit broader and then send them back out, bring that to us, and align it with our current CSIP, so it's what portion. The other thing that we could do in conjunction with that, if we chose to, is we could have a retreat just ourselves, and we could also look at our superintendent evaluation process. We could do those two things together. It's completely up to the board. So I just wanted to have a discussion on it and see what people thought. Anybody else have any opinion?
Is that 150, is that per board member or?
No, it's $150 for the self-evaluation instrument for each of us to complete and send in. They score it and send it back to us.
So it's $150 for that. And then if we have a workshop, then it is another $450 on top of that, right?
Plus travel, so it'd be at
Okay.
least, well, actually, I didn't add the other, it'd be more than that. It'd be eight, I forgot to add no matter what, you have that self-evaluation fee on top of the $450 for
Right.
2 presenters to come and then their mileage. And you can see the self-evaluation. I wanted you to have an idea of what it was. So they have on their website, they have this sample evaluation form of what kind of questions you'd be asked. And you just evaluate yourself and then it comes back. So it's completely, I just wanted to see what people thought. And then, again, we can set a workshop. It can be one of our regular scheduled meeting is usually a board workshop. We can have it that, or we can schedule a separate date. If we do have MSBA come, it would be contingent on what dates that they could come. I mean, there would be some scheduling involved.
Do we have to make this decision tonight, or can we?
No,
Okay, then if we have the retreat, could we?
I made a
guess
motion.
Oh,
She
sorry.
has we have a
She
motion
made-
on the floor. We
she's
don't have
got-
a second,
Judy
though.
made a motion on the floor to just do it ourselves.
Yes, and if you want to combine it with evaluations, that's fine also. I mean, if you've got the form that we can fill out and evaluate ourselves.
Oh, we can't do the evaluation ourselves.
No, I mean, but it's the sample that you said we could look at the grid and we can,
I mean, I can't get that self-evaluation instrument from them. We can't do that without it
well,
going
what
through
you were
them.
talking about a while ago, that you were going to put it on all of the goals we've sent to you and we would, yeah.
I was
like that.
gonna take the goals you sent, and
Right.
then we could use that as a starting point for discussion. I
Right.
was gonna align it to CSIP as much as I could, and then, of course, everybody would input.
Right.
It could all change.
Well, if we just go on and have a board retreat and work on it ourselves, if we come to a point where we think we need further clarification or help, we could do that then.
Okay. Any other discussion? Because there's a motion on the floor.
We don't have a second, though.
No, I know we don't have a
Yeah.
second, so.
A motion to have a board retreat to set the board goals and work on superintendent evaluation at the same time.
The process, yeah.
The process.
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion passed. All right, we'll start working on that. We'll look at a date, and I'll send the goals out when I get them redone. All right. Next item on the agenda is 4.1, Axle contract amendments.
Yes, we're asking the board to approve the contract extension and amendments with Axel to provide alternative transportation solutions for homeless and foster care students. This is last year during the school year, we added 2 alternative transportation providers. This is the second one. We're asking the board to extend that contract for this full school year.
Motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
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 Opposed? Motion passed.
Thank you.
Next item is memo of understanding with Comtree for behavioral health service. Dr. Cardona.
So I'm asking the board to approve the attached memorandum of understanding between Comtree and the Fox C-6 School District to allow Comtree counselors to service our students. And this is a school-based mental health service. And I just want to say that right now, because of this, we have a half-day counselor in each of our schools. Some of our higher need schools, we were able to bring in for a full day, and that just really depends on the need. So I'm just asking for your approval of that memorandum of understanding to work with Comtree.
So move.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Do you have a question, Mr.? Grunwald?
No.
Oh, okay. Motion passed. Next one is Dr. Cardona, again, 4.3, out-of-district special ed services.
So I'm asking the board to approve the attached agreement for special education services for our privately placed students per their IEP. And this is with Great Circle.
Can I get a motion, please? All in favor?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Motion passed. Dr. Cardona, can I ask, do you know how many students we have there?
I know that this is specifically for a new enrolled student.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay. Next item is 4.4, credit card authorization, Hannah Heller. Mr. Stewart.
Yes, so as you know, the district uses credit cards for purchasing various items, and we're requesting approval for a Visa credit card for Hannah Heller. She's the fax teacher at the Fox High School, and we're asking for a credit limit of $1,000, and per policy DJF, this requires board approval.
All right. Motion, please? All in favor? Yes.
Yes.
You guys, I need you to speak. You need to say.
Yes.
Thank you.
I do have a question. John, how many credit cards do we have out there now? Are we keeping track of that?
Yes, we have a list. I'm not sure the number right off the top of my head, but I can get that for you tomorrow.
Well, I don't need the information necessarily, the specific information, but I worry that we just need to keep real tight control on that.
Absolutely, and in this specific instance, it's so the teacher that was in this position last year had one, retired or moved on. Anyway, he's not with us anymore, and
So
this
we're
is the
not
replacement
adding
teacher.
another one?
Correct.
This is just, yeah, okay,
Correct.
gotcha.
John, is this in lieu of doing purchase orders for buying materials using the credit
So-
cards? I guess that expedites the process?
It expedites the process, but it is not in lieu of doing a purchase order. They still have to do a purchase order and follow the purchasing guidelines. It just allows them to, like, for instance, a fax teacher to be able to go to a local grocery store and pick up supplies for the week.
Okay.
What is the approval process then, once the purchase order is made? How's that go through the approval process?
Oh, it still goes through the, so our PO approval process is multi-level and it's electronic. So the request gets made at the building level and entered by a secretary and their assistant there, and then the building level principal approves that purchase order. It comes then routed over to the central office, and every purchase order gets reviewed by our director of finance and accounting, and then after that approval level, it goes to the appropriate assistant superintendent level for approval. Dr. Cardona does the secondaries, Dr. Gillen does the elementaries, Declan does the CNI and libraries, okay? And I know there's a few that run through Dr. Brock's, and then I take care of maintenance and custodians and food service and most of the CO purchases.
Do we have any accounts with local businesses where we have a standing line of credit? I remember we used to do that for our maintenance department.
Yes,
We had
we-
a couple companies here in town, if they needed materials or items to fix things.
Yes, we do. With different businesses, we do have some open lines of credit. Sometimes those are helpful. Sometimes it's easier, with a credit card.
Sure.
But yes, we do have some of those around town as well.
I have this worry about the use of credit cards and the volume of the use of credit cards, that can be a problematic thing.
I completely understand, and I share that same concern, and I can attest, we stay on top of that, and we're not issuing credit cards to folks willy-nilly.
Okay, I'm happy with that.
Okay.
All right, the next item, 4.5, maintenance vehicle purchase. Mr. Stewart.
So we solicited bids for a 1-ton truck that's to be used for snow plowing and snow removal and spreading salt. We have 3 trucks. One of those currently, the engine is blown and it's got severe body rust, and so that is the one that we are looking to replace. We put the RFP out. We had 2 responses from interested parties. Both of them provided a response that was not completely in line with the specs of the RFP, and so we went back and clarified with each of them to see if they could come back in line with that. In the end, Broadway Ford, in their resubmittal, was able to come back and spec there, and their you'll see their bid was $51,420 for a Ford F-150. So I would ask the board to award the bid for the purchase of a maintenance fleet truck to Broadway Ford Truck and Sales Incorporated in the amount of $51,420.
So move.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Thank
Can I
you.
ask a question about Broadway Ford or that place?
Yes.
Is that an online or is that a local place or?
It's on Broadway in downtown St. Louis.
Oh, sorry. I looked it up and I guess all I saw was their website, so good.
All right, thank you. Okay, next item is all the policy revisions. Dr. Brock.
Yes, for this item and the 2 following, there are a handful of policies that were brought at our last meeting for a first reading that the board has asked to pull out separately to discuss this evening. And so this item, 5.1, begins those items for discussion. The policies from the last meeting that were brought for a first reading, including those that are singled out this evening, the intent is to bring all of those for a second reading and adoption at our next meeting.
Okay.
So for this first one, GBCA, that's the staff conflict of interest policy. The change that MSBA was recommending to that policy is on number 9 for the prohibitions. And we did get several board member questions on that number asking for clarification of, I guess, MSBA intent or what they were trying to do. And so we did attach a proposal for a different version of that number 9 language that would keep the MSBA intent intact, but clarify the language and go ahead and set the limit. It asks for it starts out, employees will not accept gifts from an individual, student, parent, guardian, vendor, person who does or is attempting to do business with the district unless authorized by the board or the employee's immediate supervisor. And then it goes on to define what a gift is. But the part of the policy that MSBA was removing is what that value is. And so essentially, we took the value from our current policy, which is $100, and added it back in to our proposed revision that you can see on the board now. So employees will not accept gifts worth more than $100, because the way it was before, it was just very open-ended.
The policies that we got tonight don't have that on it.
Those, she,
both copies. You have the first one and the second one, they're paper close together.
and basically, the policy that was proposed allowed no gifts of any type, and that was one of the questions when I saw it myself. I thought, you know, gosh, parents give teachers presents at different times of the year, and that wouldn't be allowed by board policy anymore. So, to me, that makes sense. And I
Right,
think
or
the other thing,
for
if
every
you-
gift that you got, if you're a teacher, you'd have to go to your principal and say, hey, can I keep this? candle that, you know, my student gave me for Christmas.
Yeah. And the other thing that Judy asked about, and was a lot of teachers do teacher pay teacher, and they may have their own ideas that they post on there and they sell, or as they may purchase, and you said that that's allowable under this policy. Is that correct?
Yes, John and I looked at that together. That's number 7 on the list in the policies. And so we looked at this and we came to the conclusion that like teachers pay teachers wouldn't violate that, because the teachers, when they're putting things on teachers pay teachers, they're not copywriting or trademarking or patenting any of those things. They would need to be careful, like if they're uploading lesson plans or things like that, not to upload any copyrighted materials and things, you know, to follow copyright
Okay.
law. That would be kind of an easy trap to fall into if they're not paying attention.
Okay. Well, I guess we need a motion then, if we want to put the $100 in there and keep that in there, we need a motion to change the policy to keep the $100 in so that it can come forth next time for approval.
So, okay, are we making a motion to just do it the change, or?
We're making a motion to change it so that it can be submitted for approval next month. We're not approving it tonight. It has to go out for another reading.
What is the motivation for changing this? I'm just curious.
It was from MSBA.
Oh. It's
It's
just
on-
an MSBA recommendation?
They're updated, but they changed that gift to to nothing, and now we're adding the $100 back into it.
It's the wording on
It
it
said
that was
what
changed.
was a substantial value from vendors.
Well, aren't they trying to make it equitable to the senators and representatives that they can receive no gifts? Because we did that. Vicki and I drug gifts all over the Capitol and they couldn't take any of them. And so
Well-
aren't they equating it to what Congress is limited to? That
They didn't put anything about that in the explanation.
On the explanation, it says, MSBA has modified this policy to make it clear that the board is responsible for setting an appropriate limit on gifts and gratuities that employees have subject to this policy that they may accept. So it's just a staff conflict of interest, just like we had the board conflict of interest. And so basically, the policy as they presented it had no gifts at all. And what we're proposing is to put a limit of $100.
Well, and I think the more important change really is adding in the definition of what a gift is and what a gift
Yes.
is not.
Yes.
Um,
'Cause that-
I think
that's
that's really
in-
helpful for staff and like administrators who might attend conferences and things like that, and teachers as well. So what even falls under that policy was not really defined before.
The highlighted section is what MSBA added to the policy to clarify what a gift is, so.
Exactly.
So we have a motion and second to add in the words, employees will not accept gifts worth more than $100 into this so that we can consider it next month. We're not approving the policy, we're asking to change that, to add those words in so we can bring it back next month.
I guess the interesting thing to me is that when you put the $100 value on it, is that for one gift,
No, it's,
or is it for?
they didn't define it, Jim, it just said gifts.
Because you could give
will not
several
accept
$100 gifts.
Will not accept gifts, that's what it was previously.
It was on it before.
Okay, can we, there's a motion on the floor, and there's a second, can we get a vote? All in favor?
yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion passed. All right. Dr. Brock?
For the next set, there are three policies in this section, 5.2. So there's GCBA, which is the professional staff compensation, GCD, which is professional staff recruiting and hiring, and then GCI, professional staff reassignments and transfers. For the only note that I have is that on GCI, after these were brought for a first reading, the NEA reached out to me with a few questions about this policy.
And
Um,
Dr. Brock, the GCI is the professional staff reassignment and transfers?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yes, so they reached out to me with a few questions about this policy, so we talked about this one. And what I ended up doing was the same thing that I did for the last one. So I took their concerns and talked with them about what they were looking for, and then proposed a second attachment of GCI. So you should have 2 versions of GCI. You should have the original MSBA one, and then one that has like an amended version with our proposed revision from that. So if you look at the proposed revision based on my conversation with NEA, that's the one that has both yellow and green. So on that one, the top thing that's highlighted right in that introduction in green, MSBA was proposing to remove that. So it says, the district will accept requests for transfer from employees, but will only honor those requests when it is in the best interest of the district and the educational program to do so. In MSBA's proposal, they had crossed that sentence out. And then if you scroll down to the transfer section, JP, where it's green right there, at the bottom of the page, they had taken that same idea and rewrote it in that section instead of at the beginning. So they said the district will grant employee transfer requests only when they are in the best interest of the district, which is essentially the same concept that was in the introduction before. And the request from the NEA was that we leave it where it was. So basically this version with the green
But
is
then
what
take
we
it out
would,
at the bottom, is that what they wanted? Or do they want it in both places?
not in both places. So we
Just
would
at the
not
top.
move it to the transfer section. We would just leave it in the introduction. And so I've attached it both ways for you to look at.
Okay. So basically, it's just a change in the placement of that statement.
Right,
not
it doesn't
twice.
change the meaning of the policy.
Okay, that's fine. I'm fine with all that, but I would still like to remove the part that says after May 31st, current employees will not be considered for new or vacant positions. And I realize there is a domino effect that occurs, but I'm just gonna, I said this before, when a teacher wants to move from one grade level to another grade level, and you sometimes have to wait. You have to wait for somebody to retire, you have to wait for somebody to be transferred, to move somewhere. And if after May 31st, a position comes available that you've been wanting, and because it's after May 31st, you're not eligible to ask for that, that is not right. I mean, that is just really, and I realize there are domino effects, that when one person moves, then there's another opening, and I understand all that, but I do know that when I wanted to move from 4th grade to 2nd grade, I had to wait about 5 years to do that. I had to wait until it was my turn. So I would, people would just be heartbroken. I know that there were some people that retired this summer, and it was after May 31st, and people they did ask to be moved and transferred into those positions, and they were allowed to do that. I don't know if it was an interview process or what it was, but.
So I think what you're talking about is like in your building, you wanted to move grade levels. The May 31st deadline doesn't have to have anything to do with that. So if I'm the principal of Sherwood or of Hodge, and I have a 4th grade teacher leave in August, and a 2nd grade teacher wants to move into that spot, I, as the principal, have the autonomy to make that decision. This
So-
is only talking about transfers that would go through like the district transfer process. So I'm transferring from Sherwood to Hodge or something like that.
And so why is that restricted?
Well, for the same reason that, so if I'm just moving grade levels in my building, so, the 4th grade teacher leaves sometime in July or August, so it's very late in the year, right? And then I know that I have a 2nd grade teacher who wants to move into that 4th grade spot. As the principal, I just make that move,
Right.
and then I post the 2nd grade spot instead of the 4th grade spot. So there's no delay or domino effect
Right.
that goes with that. But if I'm moving buildings,
Right.
then I go through the transfer process and I apply And the principal of my new building, you know, talks to me or interviews me or decides if they're gonna accept my transfer. And then now I've opened up a new position in this
Right.
building. And then I get, you know, 6 more transfer applications from other buildings, and I
Right.
take one of these teachers.
Right.
And then I open up another one here.
Right.
And it just keeps on going like that
Right.
throughout the summer. And I mean, even at this point, we still have one teaching position that hasn't been filled yet. So, you know,
This year's been a
still
little bit
working on that.
unusual. We've had some resignations right at the start of the year that we don't
I
typically get.
understand the domino process, and I understand, you know, somewhere along the way, a job is gonna have to be posted anyway. So I just, you know, and I know the summer that the position was a secretarial position, and somebody went from one building to another building, and it was allowed to happen, but some people may not have, some people didn't know. There were people who didn't know that position came available, and until it had already been filled. And so there was a little bit, but
Well, and there are 2, so the May 31st deadline is for, it is part of our CBA. So last year, we went through the negotiations process with the teachers union.
right, but I think they would agree to this, taking it out.
But for the support staff that you were talking about, like you mentioned, a secretarial position, when we did the CBA last year with the teachers, we talked about revising that policy for the support staff to where the May 31st wouldn't apply to them, because it doesn't, like, we lose food service people all year round. It's not like they have a contract necessarily that starts for a certain building and we only hire food service once a year. Like, we lose them all year round. And so we discussed as a group not using that May 31st deadline for the support staff, but using a similar transfer process without that, and that's what we did this last year.
Right.
So any position that came open for support staff, whether it was after May 31st or not, those were publicized via email as internal transfer opportunities, and then those individuals could follow that process, even if it was after May 31st.
Well, but
There's also another policy that's got this on it.
it's in the reassignment thing.
Yeah. Well, I
one-
still would like to remove it.
Okay, one of the things that I know that you mentioned, it's in the collective bargaining agreement, but Dr. Patel, aren't you meeting with the group regularly anyway, that it could be brought forth before the next board meeting? So that shouldn't be a huge obstacle if the board chooses to change it. I don't know. No, but I'm sorry.
I know, I can't hear Kelly either, I can't
Dr.
understand.
Patel meets with the teacher groups, the NEA regular, and they're the bargaining unit, and if the board wants to consider removing May 31st, it'd be possible for her to take this to them before our next board meeting and let us know whether they agreed, and if they don't agree with it, then that's a different matter, but we could, again, we're approving to make the change, and we're not in the policy, we're not approving the change in the policy, if that makes
So
sense.
the-
I'm not saying that right. I'm not being very eloquent here, I'm sorry.
That step actually isn't even necessary, really. So the CBA would trump whatever is in policy. So you could take out, as you know, as the board, you could decide to take out the deadline from the policy altogether, and whatever is in the CBA is still what the rule is, regardless of what's in the policy. And so what we would end up doing is, if we wanted to make that change, we would end up kind of doing what we did last year. So I would talk with the NEA, or Dr. Patel would talk with the NEA, and we would revise our CBA and bring that to the board. But as far as that May 31st deadline being in policy, the board can take that out with or without talking to anyone. That's the board's prerogative.
Just a philosophical statement about that. With your current employees, I think there should be an effort to try to accommodate them any way you possibly can, if possible. Putting this deadline on there for May 31st, I don't see that as a method of trying to accommodate your employees much, those that are working for you. And so I can't remember a time that we ever had a deadline for anything like that. And our goal was always to try to help the employees to the extent we can, with ensuring that we would not do anything that would jeopardize the quality of the program. And so I just don't understand why it's there to begin with, to be honest with you.
Well,
So
did
Kelly,
you make a motion, Judy? I don't know if you did. Okay.
yeah, Kelly, I just want to be clear. You're saying that we can change this in policy, but the CBA would stay the same. Is that what you're saying? Are you going to go back to NEA and make that proposal so that it can be changed? Say that it was really difficult to hear over here on this side.
Yes, you can make the change in policy, and then I can go back to the NEA and make that proposal to them that we adjust the CBA.
Okay.
And then that would be brought at another meeting, because the board would have to vote to approve that as well.
So basically what this is going to allow to happen, I want to make sure we have a clear understanding, that say I'm trying to think of a position that would open. I'm going to say a counselor's position. A counselor's position would open up at a middle school, and I'm an elementary teacher. It opens up let's say it opens up June 1st. And now I could have the opportunity to apply for that position, where
Yes.
before I would not have that opportunity.
That's
You
correct.
would, okay.
Right, you would go, and you wouldn't even really apply. You would go
Mhm.
through the same transfer process that we put in place last year, so it's kind of like a
Okay.
Google form and things like that. It's not even filling out the application.
Okay. All right.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'm making a motion that the wording be changed, left at the top, taken out at the bottom, and that the May 31st current employees would not be considered for new or vacant positions unless the position would be considered a promotion, be taken out.
Do we need to add in there, then we'd follow the same transfer policy?
That's fine.
I think
And
that's.
that
the employees would
transfer
follow the
is-
transfer
the-
policy.
The procedure is always already in there. The procedure is a separate document that we approved last year. This is the policy, so that's really not necessary, Crystal.
Okay.
It's just that sentence, the second sentence in the
Yes.
transfer section. It's
Okay.
if that second sentence is taken out, then the rule goes away. And then just to clarify the motion, Judy, for Jamie, that would apply to any of these policies, any of these three that have that deadline in there,
Yes,
because there's some
please.
repetition.
Yes. Yes. And so leaving the green at the top and taking the green out at the bottom, that was, yeah, okay, that's perfect.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor.
Second.
All in favor? Any?
Yes.
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 Okay, motion passed. The next one is academic calendar, IC. And this is another one where the wording was confusing, so Dr. Bracht has come up with other wording that hopefully will clarify.
Yes, so on IC, there's actually 3 versions attached. There's the original from MSBA, and then there are 2 others, because I wasn't sure which direction the board would want to go. So they give 2 different options. So on IC, towards the end, I think it's not the last paragraph, but it's maybe the second to last paragraph. If you start at the second sentence, so the last 2 words on that page, the board. The board will make the final decision on amendments to the board-adopted calendar, school closures that are expected to last longer than a week, and decisions to end the school year early. So we got several questions about that sentence because it's confusing as far as what's required and what's not required. So since the board adopts the school calendar, they also have to approve any amendments to that calendar. So the first part of that sentence, the board will make the final decision on amendments to the board-approved calendar. That part is a requirement. The second phrase there that says school closures that are expected to last longer than a week, An example of that would be that we were closed, from March 18th or March 17th on last year. So our buildings were closed, but school was still in session. So that did not change the calendar at all. So that is not a required action of the board. And then the third phrase in that sentence where it says, and decisions to end the school year early, that is just another example of an amendment to the board adopted calendar. So last year, there were a few districts in the state that said, you know what, we've met our required number of hours. It is May 1st, and we are just going to end school now. And that's actually ending school, whether virtual or in person. So that's an amendment to the calendar, which means the board has to approve it, which makes it redundant and confusing when it's written into the policy. So I have two different versions that are attached.
I'm sorry, that first one you just read is the one that MSBA is proposing, correct?
Right, that's
Okay.
correct.
So here's the other alternatives.
So the second version in that paragraph, the paragraph actually starts, the superintendent or designee has the authority to make the final decision to close school buildings on a day-to-day or short-term basis due to inclement weather. So on this version, I removed the on a day-to-day or short-term basis phrase. And then if you look at the second page, I removed everything after the board will make the final decision on amendments to the board adopted calendar, period. So it just ends right there. And that amendment basically puts the decision in the superintendent's hands or in Dr. Patel's hands for any school closures, as long as they don't result in a change to the school calendar, the board adopted school calendar. So whether we're going to be virtual or in person or the hybrid like we're doing right now, this version makes it plain that those decisions are in the hands of the superintendent. If you look at version 3, this one gives you, or gives the board, I should say, the most flexibility. So it starts out, the superintendent or designee has the authority to make the final decision to close school buildings on a day-to-day or short-term basis. And I left that phrase there. And then if you go to the next sentence where it says, the board will make the final decision on amendments to the board adopted calendar, period. And then I reworded the last sentence. So now, instead of saying the board will make, it says the board may make the final decision on school closures that are expected to last longer than a week, or may delegate that decision to the superintendent. And so that this version gives the flexibility for the current board to handle it how they want to, but also for future boards to handle it how they want to handle it.
Okay. I'm sorry, I have a question. As you were describing it earlier, even in the one that MSBA is proposing, if school was closed, but the instruction was still being provided, the school calendar didn't change, so that would not require any action on the part of the board. Is that correct? It's only when the actual calendar days close. So, for example, in your phase-in plan, where you had in there, if we're doing the prep, there's going to be 2 days of e-learning, that's not changing the calendar because the kids are still going to get instruction. So that actual change of the e-learning days would not require a vote of the board, correct? If I'm, okay.
Correct.
So those are our choices, which way we want to go. To take the first one from the MSBA, the second one where we would approve all changes, or the third ones where it could be either way. We could give that authority to the superintendent, or the board could keep it.
Just from the comments that I've gotten, I think the main problem with the first one is just that it seems confusing to people when they read it.
Yeah. I think that I don't know how anybody feels, but that's an important responsibility, I think, on the board to approve the calendar. It's different than going with a reentry plan, but actually changing the days. Just like when we moved the PD days to the front of the school year, we had to approve that.
Right, and that part would be required, a change like that would be required regardless of which of these three versions you went with.
Okay, but the third one, doesn't it say the superintendent can make that decision?
No.
The board could
'cause
designate it to the
still
super-
starts, it still says the board will make the final decision on amendments to the board adopted calendar,
Okay.
which is what that would be. The only part that it gives the flexibility for is like
Longer
what
than a
happened
week.
in March. So where we closed the building for, 2 months, but we didn't close school. But we didn't actually change the calendar then. We just closed or opened a building. If we're changing the calendar, that's always going to require board approval.
So basically, what we're asking is, do you want to stick with the one from MSBA, or do you want to choose one of the other two versions to bring next time for approval? So we can be clear on it. Does everybody understand? Well, she's got to know what to bring to the next meeting. I guess we could make it go longer.
What are the issues between the three that would make a difference for us as a school board? I mean,
Well, the last one, to me, and Kelly, you correct me if I'm wrong, the last one gives more flexibility because it says the board may make the final decision on school closures that are anticipated to last more a week, or may delegate that decision to the superintendent.
I think having that flexibility in there is an important thing for us, because there may be things happening that would require us to have to get together very quickly, and generally speaking, most of those decisions, I think the superintendent ultimately would have to make based on the information they have. So that would be the one that I would recommend.
Right, and.
This last one?
Yeah.
Version 3. Yeah, and to Mr. Schlu's point, we would if we went with version 1, or if we had version 1 in place, MSBA's version, the board would have had to vote in March for us to close school starting March 18th.
But with the third version, what would happen?
You could choose to vote, or you could choose to delegate.
Right, which one do you like? The last one.
Okay, I guess I need a motion on which version
So
you want.
move.
No, you gotta say which one you want. You want version 3? Are you moving for version 3, the last one?
That's the one I was making a
Okay.
motion for.
All in favor?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, I think we're almost done here. Let's see, I lost my place. Okay, 5-4. Now this one's going to be even more complicated. Mr. Stewart,
Yes, so since Dr. Brock brought you policy versions with 2 different versions and one with 3 different versions, I wanted to one-upper, and I'm giving you one with 4 different versions here. To clarify, we do not currently have this policy, DIAA. It is not in existence for the Fox School District. This is a policy we need to have in place in some form or another, thus the 4 versions. And I will walk through the 4 versions for you after I explain the requirements that we're trying to meet here. So back in 2010-ish, the GASB, which is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, passed GASB 54. And while the Governmental Accounting Standards Board does not have any ability to penalize folks for not following their policy, they're a big deal in the accounting world. And ultimately, not following GASB policy can affect an entity's bond ratings and the like. Okay, so it's important as far as our ability to borrow at good rates. And so we should have adopted a policy, the district should have adopted this policy 9 years ago or so. So the 4 different versions, and I apologize that they're not in the order that we're not going to address them in the order that they're numbered, but the first one we're going to look at is version 3, and this one would be what I would say would be considered the base policy that would get us fully in compliance with the board having a policy relating to GASB 54. And all GASB 54 does is state that we will separate our fund balances into these 5 different categories, and ultimately all that it relates to is at our year end, and it's in our audit report. Now, we have been doing this, and it's in our audit report for the last several years. We just didn't have an official policy that said we would do it. So I would like us to have an official policy, especially changing auditors, you know, so that we're in compliance there. So, so that would be like the base policy. Hey, we're going to follow GASB 54. These are the 5 different categories of fund balances, and talks about actions for leading to the restricted and committed and assigned fund balances, and then tells what order of spending would occur with those fund balances in the new year. So the next 2, versions 1 and versions 4, are very similar to each other. But what they do, that version, let me get this right here, what they do, the version 3 did not. So, and I will tell you, these 4 versions are versions that each one is a version that a school district here in Missouri has at this point in time, okay? So they're all acceptable in one way or another. It's just what direction the board wants to go. So version 3 being the base. If you look at version 1 and version 4, these 2 talk about the same thing with GASB 54, you know, compliance with GASB 54 in those 5 different categories. But then they also take the opportunity to talk about operating fund balances in the school district and how important those are. And it talks about, these 2 policies talk about the board recognizing how important those are, and states that the board will, they will maintain sufficient financial reserves to provide for prudent financial management and for adequacy of cash flow and support operations. So it talks about maintaining appropriate fund balances, which we need to do, but it doesn't give a hard number, okay? So it says, yes, we're going to do this, and we'll do it, but it doesn't give you a hard target. Version 2, and so version 1 is kind of the lesser of those 2. Version 4 just goes into a little more detail on what those minimum fund balances are, but it's just more detail. It doesn't change the effect of it. Version 2 happens to be the version that I am more familiar with. The last 2 districts that I was in had version 2, and all it does, different from the previous 2 versions, is it adds a specific range of operating fund balances. Okay, so it says, and that range would be decided upon by the board. And so I know, you know, there's been discussion at these tables anyway over the last couple of years that, you know, an appropriate or a good target would be 20%. And I know over the last few years, you know, there's been a dollar figure target of about 15.6 million. But as a percentage-wise, it would probably be a little better to have that be, you know, 15%. So, you know, you could put in policy our target. The board desires to have operating funds equal to a range of 15 to 20% of its prior year expenditures. But then this also goes on to say, and if it falls below the 15%, the board will take action to restore those balances within 2 years. Within 2 years. And that, you know, and that's something in the policy too that, you know, is it going to be 2 years, is it going to be 3 years? I will tell you that rating agencies such as S&P and Moody's when they are looking at giving a bond rating for the sale of bonds, a policy that has a specific number carries a lot more weight with them instead of yeah, we'll keep appropriate reserves. So,
Okay, but Mr. Stewart, given our financial status, what happens if, I mean, this could become reality that our fund balances would be below that in a relatively short period of time, so then, I mean,
well, it says, the wording in this version, in version 2, says that if fund balances decline below the floor, which in this one is 15%, the board will develop a plan to replenish the fund balance to establish minimum level within 2 years. So you'll develop a plan within 2 years.
I'd like to remind the
Not to
board
replenish
that,
it, but to develop a plan within 2 years.
Well, I guess it would depend on how you read it. So you're developing the plan within 2 years, or you're developing the plan to address it,
In 2 years, yeah.
meaning that
establish
you
it-
had to replenish it.
within 2 years.
Right.
So it would be, yeah, I guess it would depend on what your interpretation of what your desire as the board to do would be. What your goal would be. Do you,
if you guys remember, when I was doing my superintendent goals, this is one of the things that I really, really want us to do, is actually establish a range that we want in our fund balance. And I think this version is it version 2? Version 2, I
Version
believe,
2.
is the one that allows us to do that. And so that way we have a target, we have a goal, and Vicki, I understand your concern, but then that's what allows us to be proactive in creating an action plan.
Well,
I just wanted to make sure that I was clear that that was your recommendation, because, you know, right now, we're in a place that we could be there pretty quickly. We could be at that point.
oh, absolutely. I mean,
We're there
we're
now.
below 15% now.
Yeah, we're there right now.
what would be 15% of our current?
So you're talking roughly 19 million, 18 to 19 million?
13 right now, John?
We ended the year last year with 15.3 million, which was 13.53%, if I recall correctly.
13, okay. And we're projecting 10% next year? What's our projection for next year?
I'm trying to recall my last projection. It was, we're going to keep it north of 10.
10?
Yeah, we will keep it north of 10.
Okay. I mean, I think we all would like to see us at 15 to 20. The problem is, right now, financially, that's not where we're capable of being.
And also, I'm just, so this version that has the 15 to 20, that was the way it was when I found it online at whatever district it was in. So, I mean, I think those are probably pretty good numbers for this district. But we could set those numbers at whatever the board would desire those, as far as the range and the floor.
Based on our current situation, how much of a fund balance do you have to literally get through to December? How much of a fund balance do you have to have in June to get through to December and not have to borrow money?
Looking at where we ended this last year, I would say it's above 13.53, because we have that TAN in place, and I'm pretty certain we will be using that at some point in November.
I think to show the community progress, so we don't get in this again, I think we do need to have a specific goal. So I don't know what that number is, but do you have to have like a 15 to 20, or can you just pick a number?
You can,
Or
the board can set that range at what they feel is appropriate. I could do some calculations if you'd like, if you would like to, like me to bring back some different ranges and show you what those mean.
Did you have a suggestion?
Well, based on information that I saw in various presentations before, I would say, 20% would be a fantastic target.
We've been there.
Okay, so if we could maintain 20, I think that would be fantastic. We'd be able to fund the programs that we need to. We'd be able to fund salary schedules as we need to, provide the right benefit packages and maintain our buildings and all that. But getting to 20% is not going to happen just by wishing or by cutting. We're not going to get there by doing that. But
So
you
you're
also have to
recommending
realize
probably
if
the
your
15 to
goal is
20.
20% and that's where you want to be, there's good years and bad years. Right now we're experiencing a bad year, and so you got to plan for at some point in time where you're in a bad economic situation through not even necessarily any fault of the districts, because a pandemic happens, that you're going to have the reserves there to carry you through that lean time until things turn back around, and then you can replenish that and get back to a sufficient level. So, I think 20% would be a fantastic goal, and a floor of, I would say no less than 15 would be a good floor.
So you're basically recommending version 2, which has the 15 to 20?
I think that would be a good starting point, and that's something too, as you all are aware, you revise policies here and there. If, numbers change, things grow, your assessed valuation mix changes, and, maybe your mix of revenue between what you're getting from the state and what you're getting from local taxes change. And so, depending on those changes, you could readjust that target.
Well, we would just be approving this for our first reading, right?
Correct.
Because it would come next time. So what do you guys think? Do you want to go with version 2, or do you want to go with one of the other ones?
Are you recommending, John, 2?
With the 15 to 20%.
I think version 2 would be a fantastic policy to adopt.
And that would be
It covers the
within-
board as far as GASB 54 requirements, and it shows that the board is
Serious.
concerned about our fund balances, and we're going to take action, and we know that we've got a goal, and we're going to do something.
Can we set that goal for a 3-year period in light of what we're dealing with right now? Because that gives the board a little
You mean as far as the wording and adjusting it?
Right.
Absolutely.
Because we're losing a year right now.
Right,
So,
absolutely.
Right.
I think that's a good idea.
And John, this will help us whenever we start to sell those bonds, right,
Yes.
with having that number.
Right, having a policy in
Yeah.
place that addresses those issues. The rating agencies and bankers love to see that there's, hard targets and goals.
Okay, so I need a motion if you want version 2 with that modification to increase it to 3 years. Is that correct, Jim?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
And this is just an approval of this
First read,
first reading.
yes.
All right, next item on the agenda. Let's see, Dr. Brock, consent agenda, items 6.2 through 6.7.
Yes, we are requesting the board's approval for all attached hires, stipends, modifications, separations, and the attached destruction of records.
Can I get a motion? All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Let's see, I think we're done.
Just
Mo-
one final thing. I've been watching Dr. Patel do a pencil spinning trick over there for about 15 minutes now. I want you to demonstrate that for the entire community because it's pretty impressive.
You mean my habit that I have of doing,
Your pencil spinning thing, because I'm impressed.
you know?
She must have taken baton. All right. I need a motion to adjourn, please.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Yes.